Hi everyone, welcome back to Youth Convo. I'm Lillian.
And I'm Phoebe.
Last week when you guys were here with Nase and Reese, they talked about our relationship with the Father below and also how Wormwood shouldn't argue with the enemy because arguing with the enemy leads to holes within the patient's mind. And having these holes there can be negative because it can lead the patient to researching and diving deep into Christianity. And we kind of see that this week because the patient has become a Christian. And Screwtape describes this as a great displeasure. Phoebe, why do you think that is?
I think Screwtape describes it as a great displeasure because it would not be in favor of the devil if people of the world were to convert to Christianity.
True. But I think it's also a good thing to note that he also says there's no need to despair. He doesn't sound worried. Why wouldn't he worry?
Well, he wouldn't have to worry because being a Christian doesn't exclude you of every sin that you could possibly make or exclude you from worldly desires. So you're still human. You just have your faith in God driving you to hopefully not lead you towards a terrible path.
It's funny you mention worldly actions because our worldly habits represented in both our mental state and our physical state. Screwtape says that it's still in his favor, still in the favor of our Father below. Why do you think it's still in his favor?
I think it's still in his favor because, there's a reason why people still come to church. Nobody here is perfect. So there are certain characteristics and traits within the average human being that makes them less desirable when coming to church, such as somebody who's a hypocrite. You can come and claim certain judgments upon other people, but then you do it yourself. So there's a reason why people come to church. That's because they're not perfect. So I think knowing that we aren't perfect and we're still capable of making those same mistakes over and over again is why he says it's still in his favor, because we can still go to a path that could lead us towards the devil more.
It's funny that you mentioned the church because he says that the church is one of his best assets into bringing the patient back into his clutches. Because when we think of the church, we think of it as a place where Christians come together to worship. We sing songs, we learn hymnals, we have our devotions. It's not some place where you think that one would fall back into the hands of the devil. So why do you think that the church itself has so much impact on the patient?
I think the church has an impact on the patient because when a newcomer comes to church, before coming to church, they're usually they have this expectation in their head of what a regular spiritual church is supposed to be like. And so when you come to the church and you find that those certain things aren't there, it more so leads to why it's still in his favor because you're led down. And when humans are when your idealizations are crushed in a certain way, it could lead you astray from the church.
Do you think those idealizations are the reason why so many people criticize the church?
Of course.
Because I guess as someone who's very frequent on social media, when I go up to posts that are relating to Christianity, it's always bad-mouthing the church. Because like you said, people have these expectations of the church, and that when they go there, they see that it can't be fulfilled. And then that fulfillment just leads them astray. And I think that in itself is very interesting because it's exactly what Screwtape wants from us. He wants people to go to the church and realize that everything they had in mind of the church is not what it is. That leads them away. So how do you think that we as Christians can sort of that word for decentralizing it or denormalizing the standards that people have of the church?
Well, I don't think we could actually set down the standards of what people have of the church, mostly because a lot of the standards set are from the Bible itself. So people just use the word itself to hit it against Christians, as to say that you aren't a certain you're not portraying the certain characteristics you're supposed to be. So I think we can't actually turn back from the characterizations people put on Christianity, because it is in the Bible and people use it to justify why they aren't Christians themselves, or why you aren't a better Christian than me, or something like that.
But that's what people have in mind. They have the thinking that Christians think of themselves as higher than everyone else. That I think that expectation is what normally like diverts people from coming. You brought up an example of, I think, a newcomer coming into this church. They come into a church and they see all these picture perfect Christians. They haven't been in the church long enough to know what's truly going on. They see that. And I feel like if that was me, I'd be very discouraged. As a new person coming into an area where it looks like people are perfect, I feel like I'd want to turn away because I don't feel comfortable here. Like, these people, they know what they're doing. They're in a state of reassurance. But how can we make it so that people understand that we're all on the same level, that we're all in the same place, that we're all struggling?
I think there's a positive side to that, because if you can look at yourself and you feel like you don't fit in, I feel like, one, that's a great thing. To some extent, though, because in your example, you said they're being fake and you don't really know what's going on yet. But I think to some extent, when a new person comes to a church and they feel out of place, that's a good sign. It's a good sign because now you're looking at yourself and you're reflecting at the kind of person you are to be now, looking at these people. But with your specific example, that's something else. But I can see the positive in this when a new person comes into the church.
Because as I kept like reading, Screwtape wants the patience that he has to keep that fake Christian in mind. He doesn't want them to see the real Christian out there, because he knows that once like the patient sees that, it builds that relatability factor. Like, oh, we're going through this struggle together. Like, I know that there's some issues that I have to overcome, and you also have that issue. And I think it's a very interesting point that the church alone can have this much impact on a human's being want to keep coming to church or want to pull away from Christ.
Yeah, and I think that's why God, in the Bible, it's really clear that we should be welcoming of everybody, and that's why I think the church should be one of the safest place any non-believer should be able to come in. So in any moment where it's not portrayed that way, we aren't doing our jobs as Christians, and that's just facts. So yeah.
Another point Screwtape actually also picks on is the disappointment factor. We've already talked about how sometimes newcomers' expectations of the church isn't always up to par with what they think the church should be. And Screwtape wants us to hone in on disappointments like these, because these disappointments sort of slowly shatter us as human beings. Do you kind of understand what I mean by shatter?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you think?
Well, I think that, yeah, it does affect us in a way. And it, in fact, might be one of the main things that drives us to not be in the church anymore. Because when you hold something to a certain expectation and it doesn't exceed or come close to that expectation, you become disappointment. And so it's easier for you to turn away from it. And I think that's why we can see that the devil here is still in favor, because as long as you're disappointed, there's a possibility and there's a greater chance of you walking away because it's not what you expected. But if you are a different human being and you want to keep coming to see what it's more about. You get to see certain things and certain things you probably didn't notice or see before. And when you open your eyes and become less disappointed, Screw Tape lets us know that it's harder for you to be tempted by the devil, because now your eyes are more open to the truth and not to your idealization of what you thought was happening.
I also kind of want to just make clear that the disappointment isn't only centered to being disappointed at church expectations. It could be wanting this new car for so long. You've been in this state of hardworking, working day and night, longing to get a car, and then it just doesn't pull through. Working to get a house, to boost up your grades. You studied so hard for this one test, and you feel it in your bones that you're going to do so well on the test, and then you go in and you fail. And I think that these small disappointments can also lead into Christ, because as, let's say, a Christian who's going through all of those struggles, you go through so many disappointment after disappointment, and you feel the sense that nothing is changing. Once you feel that nothing is changing, you are like, God, like, what are we doing right now? You know, like, I thought we were in this together. You're supposed to help me out. And I sort of think that that's what our Father below wants. He wants Christians to be emotional in the sense that they're so disappointed to the point they think that God isn't helping them, because it's easier.
Exactly. And we see that basically almost every day throughout our daily lives. And I think that's where the concept of faith comes into play here. We all know that by having strong faith, you are most likely to have a different view of how you see what God does for you. So in moments when you're mad at God and you're disappointed for why you didn't get what you wanted, you're more able to open your eyes and see more clearly why you didn't get what you wanted.
Sort of straying a little bit away from the disappointment, he sort of makes references to new beginnings in life and how we sort of have to learn to deal with these new beginnings, and how these new beginnings can also lead patients back into our Father below's favor. He says that he uses the example of lovers who've gotten married. They're in the honeymoon stages, but then when they start to live together, they get to experience the life that is living with each other. Like, before living with you, I didn't know that, oh, you have this tick that's not good, or like something you do that really pisses me off. And I think he's trying to say that he wants we as humans to increase in those, because instead of sort of honing in and learning and being like what's like the word for accepting, and being accepting of the little things that we do, he wants us to hone in on the disgust. Oh, like, I can't believe you do this. So, Phoebe, how do you think that people honing into these tics play into our Father below's hands?
I think it makes it easier to, resent somebody. Not resent, but like find something to dislike about somebody when you find certain things that you don't like. When you find certain things that you don't like about the person, like you spoke about the couple in the relationship, like when you find out that, oh, this person leaves their laundry all over the floor, it creates when it's repeating, when the same thing repeats over and over and over, it could cause you to be angry, which can lead you closer to the Father, to the Father below's side much more.
Yeah, because we're honing in on all the anger, patience, hatred, and that's exactly what the Father wants. But we know that the enemy, on the other hand, lives by the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness. And sort of having all these tics and honing into those disgust of the tics draws us away from that, because we're not feeling all the love, all the patience, all the kindness. We're feeling all the hatred and the anger, and it sort of gives and it sort of gives the Father below an opportunity to snatch us because we've now done something that he likes, that he can take advantage of.
Exactly.
So how do you think that we how do you think that we can learn to overcome the things that make us angry at other people? Like, for example, how with the couple, how can they learn to be more accepting of those tics? Because if we can't be more accepting to those, then, like you said, we build up all of these negative feelings, and it gives the Father below an opportunity to take us.
I think well, the we know that it's a tick, so you have to communicate that it is a tick, or you yourself have to understand that it 100% bothers you what that person's doing. So as long as you understand that, it sets you in the right place. And I think in terms of resolving it, it's important that you understand why the tick even exists to begin with, because I think there are certain things that people do that exist because of certain past experiences and stuff like that. So I think understanding why that tick exists to begin with is one step closer to solving that tick. However, if there's no deniable good explanation for why that tick exists, I think it's important for both people to express why that tick, like talk about the tick basically, and see where you can go further on. Because if you keep avoiding and you try to be patient about it, I think not only does it not solve the problem, but it builds up over time. And so when it builds up, it could cause something terrible for you, the relationship that you both have, to go another direction simply because of one tick that could have been resolved if it was handled another way. So yeah.
It's funny you mention understanding, because as I'm reading this, it seems like it's something that the Father below doesn't want us to do. He doesn't want us to build these understandings with each other, to communicate with each other, because in order to build an understanding of any sort, you have to do research. And I think towards the middle or beginning of chapter 1, it talks about how we shouldn't want research, how the Father below doesn't want us to research or question, because I think I said this at the beginning, but
Makes you
questioning
curious,
makes you
and it
curious.
makes you want to learn more. Yeah.
And the more that you learn, let's say about Christianity, the more that you want to go through with it. And I think it's important for us, even when it's difficult, to continue to build understandings with each other, because it gives the devil less opportunities to come at us. So today we learned that despite being a Christian, the devil can still get us by making us focus on the imperfections of the church, making us hone in on the impact of disappointment, and sort of straying us away from understanding. So it's important for us as individuals, in order to grow as people and grow in our Christianity, to do what we can to live within the fruit of Christ and everything he has prepared for us. Thank you for tuning in on this week's episode. We are very excited to see you guys next week with brand new faces. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and follow all our socials, which will be at the description box. Thank you so much.